First Canto, Chapter 10, entitled The Departure of Lord Krishna for Dwarka. And we are taking a look today at text number 22. Sa eva bhuyo nijavirya choditam Svajivamayam prakritim sisrikshatim Anamarupatmani rupanamani Vidit samano nusasara sashtrakrit Sa eva bhuyo nijavirya choditam Svajivamayam prakritim sisrikshatim Anamarupatmani rupanamani Vidit samano nusasara shastrakrit Sa eva bhujo nijavirya choditam Svajivamayam prakritim sisrikshatim Anamarupatmani rupanamani Vidit samano nusasara shastrakrit
Eva bhuya nijavirya choditam Svajivamayam prakritim sisrikshatim
Svajivamayam prakritim sisrikshatim
Namarupatmani rupanamani Vidit samano nusara shastrakrit
Vidit samano nusasara shastrakrit Sa eva bhuyo nijavirya choditam Sajivamayam prakritim sisrikshatim Anamarupatmani rupanamani Vidit samano nusasara shastrakrit. Ladies. Sa eva bhuyo nijavirya choditam Svajivamayam prakritim sisrikshatim Anamarupatmani rupanamani Vidit samano nusasara shastrakrit Sa eva bhuyo nijavirya choditam Swajiva mayam prakritim sisrikshatim Anama forms to his parts and parcels, the living entities, placed them under the guidance of material nature. By his own potency, material nature is empowered to recreate. When we shut that door. The word Brahmana comes from the Sanskrit root Bri. So, Sanskrit words are very interesting because they are very, as Prabhupada would say, scientific. So you have roots, many different roots called dhatus, and then these dhatus, these root words, they are combined with other pieces, and then you sort of build up different words in that way. For example, yesterday we were at Matchless Gifts and Maharaj was explaining how the word suprasidati, remember he was explaining that suprasidati means, prasidati means satisfied, pra means increasingly, fully satisfied, and su means very much, completely. So in this way you can take any Sanskrit word and you can sort of break it up in different parts, and then in that way increase your understanding of what it means. Very interesting. But the word Brahmana comes from one of the roots, root Bri, which means to expand or expansive, big, vast. And Brahman, in one sense, that's what it means. It means the vast expanse, the infinite, the great, the big, broad. And a Brahmana is someone who knows Brahman, someone whose consciousness is broad, great, a broad-minded individual, Prabhupada would oftentimes translate it as. And this is what we see then, ultimately, that there, as Prabhupada says here, there are these two kinds of beings, the Nitya Mukta and the Nitya Bara. And one can also say that there are two kinds of beings, the Brahmana and the Kripana. There's those who are broad-minded and those who are small-minded. And you fall somewhere in between. The more broad-minded you become, the more you become a Brahmana, someone who is having spiritual vision, someone who can see the bigger picture. And the further away you go from spiritual consciousness, you become more and more a Kripana, a small-minded individual. So, the Vedas explain to us that knowledge, one could say, has three components. Or there's the idea of sambandha, abhideya, and prayojana. An important concept. Basically, the sambandha is the first step in knowledge, which means to understand what is our relationship. How this world works is that nothing in this world is experienced as it is. It is all experienced in a certain kind of relationship. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives the example in the pastime of Jat Bharat. He tells King Rahugana, he says that the soul actually has nothing to do with this world. It's nothing to do with this world. And then Maharaj Rahugana, he says, well, we can see that, you might say that, but if I carry something very heavy, I become tired. What can I say? I mean, you can say that the soul has nothing to do with the world, but I can feel that this world still has a big influence on me. So then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives an interesting example. He says, well, that's also not really true, because it depends on the relationship. He says, if you're working for your boss, if you're working and you become very fatigued, that's one thing. But if you are carrying your child on your back, then there's no fatigue. So the same weight that you can carry, it depends on what's your relationship with what it is that you're carrying. If you're working for someone you don't like, then very difficult. But that same amount of labor, if you do it for someone that you do love, then it becomes it's not at all fatiguing. So interesting how everything we experience in this world, it depends on the relationship that we have with it. We see then that is the distinction between, as Prabhupada says here, the conditioned being, he has a specific kind of relationship with the material energy. And one of the consequences of looking at the world as a conditioned being is that you make all kinds of plans. All kinds of plans. Constantly scheming. Always scheming. Trying to think how to get what you want. And how to get a situation that sort of works for you. So a large part of our energy goes into that. Always scheming, trying to make our plans. We're living our life and sort of trying to make the best of it, but at the same time, always thinking, how can we improve? Prabhupada says here, they are very busy in making plans in the material world for becoming happy. They go on merrily with plans, but by the will of the Lord, both the plan makers and the plans are annihilated at the end. So, very stark, but that is exactly as it is. It is interesting that the Vedic philosophy, it gives us this understanding that actually material life doesn't go anywhere. It is just basically going in a circle. There's no end to it. In the modern conception, modern life is a peculiar philosophy that they can call the idea of progress. It's a very new idea. This idea that human society can really change through progress. It can overcome ultimately all suffering. And that is the plan, that is the hope. By medical science we hope to overcome disease and death and old age. That is the plan, that they think that they are fundamentally altering the life as we live it. And they think that in 100, 200, 300 years, maybe 1,000 years, then through artificial intelligence or through medical technology, there will be no more death, no more disease. One can simply just grow new organs from stem cells. And if you become old, then they can change the genes, because ultimately aging is something that is built into the genes. That you can see, some people they age very quickly, some people they can take a long time, they don't even get wrinkles. So they think that by adjusting the genes, then you can change aging. So this then is the epitome of making plans, thinking that you can really adjust the material world to make it a permanent situation. But unfortunately, that is not really the case. It will not really happen. Because what is really just happening is that it is just a cycle of creation and destruction. Everything that you create, at a certain point it will collapse again. So that is then, the Vedas explain how there is 4 kinds of consciousness. There is wakefulness, where one is awake. Then there is the dream state, where one is dreaming. Then there is sleep, and then there is deep sleep. But it is explained that most living beings, especially human beings, they are not actually awake. They are dreaming. Even when it looks like we are awake, we're actually dreaming. Because the whole time we're making these plans, these dreams that we have, and we're actually living there most of the time. Even when we're going through our daily business, washing the dishes or whatever it is, doing something, you're actually dreaming. A large part of your consciousness is somewhere else, somewhere in the future or somewhere in the past, living in your imagination. Now what is interesting about these dreams is that these dreams, they will never ultimately happen exactly as you want it. That's the one thing. If you speak with anyone in this world who has been around for a while, then you can see that no one's life turns out exactly as they planned it, isn't it? That is a fact. No one's life goes exactly according to plan. But still at the same time, even though our plans do not always manifest, the plans that you make have a real consequence, because these plans ultimately direct you, you push yourself in certain directions according to what you are thinking. So a large part then in spiritual life is to change ultimately the way in which we relate to this world, and change the content of all these plans we are making, start to adjust this kind of a vision, so that we can ultimately, first step in spiritual life is to become a little bit more peaceful. So in the Bhagavad Gita it is explained how the Brahman stage, the stage of spiritual life, is where one becomes satisfied. And a large part of satisfaction is exactly that. It means to stop this obsession that we have with trying to make some kind of adjustment, trying to think about some other destination where we would like to be. So that is a part in spiritual life where we just become sort of peaceful. Just wherever we are, we make the most of the experience that we have, and that ultimately our faith is more situated in what we can do for Krishna in a specific situation than in necessarily trying to change the situation and make the situation perfect. It is at that point that one becomes more peaceful and more satisfied, because you're not kicking and resisting whatever the situation that Krishna has made for us. And when also there's a certain sense of fear that we have, that if I do this, then what will happen? Then I will get stuck maybe in a situation that is very undesirable. It's a little frightening to think what would happen if I stop making all my plans. But no, that is not a fact, because we see that Krishna also takes us to different destinations. Krishna also adjusts the environment. This is the big thing, that without understanding that the material energy is ultimately under Krishna's control, it is very difficult to release or to stop this obsession that we have with trying to control the material energy ourselves. Other traditions, the Buddhists, the impersonalists, they also try to do this because they see that it is this kicking, it is this resistance, this craving that we have, this push that we have to try to manipulate matter, that is the source of all our dissatisfaction. That is the source of all our discomfort, because it is there that we basically put ourselves against the reality. So they all try to eradicate that by becoming desireless. That's the whole point. If one becomes desireless, then the material energy can ultimately not inflict suffering on us. But it is very frightening. If there's no conception of Krishna, it becomes very difficult. But if there is a conception of Krishna, then we understand two things. Yes, I am not the controller. I'm not the control. But someone is in control, so I don't have to fear. I don't have to be afraid. Krishna is ultimately in control, and Krishna is the one who can adjust the situation according to what needs to be. And that we also see in our own life. How very often we can sometimes see that Krishna makes these specific arrangements, mostly one can see it, Krishna makes this arrangement by who he sends into our life, connecting us with devotees, with people at the right time and at the right place, who can then really help us. So that's the nice thing about devotional service, that yes, we have a stark vision perhaps about material life, but at the same time we have a broader understanding that behind it there is Krishna, who is benevolent, very merciful, very kind ultimately, and also very concerned about the well-being of his devotees. And it is in this dual understanding that one can start to become a little bit more pacified, understanding that ultimately everything will unfold as it should. And my role in it is not necessarily to be the ultimate controller, but to make my contribution, to participate as far as I can, to do what I can with what Krishna has given me. So very nice, a very nice state of mind to have. So this then is this idea of the sambandha, that we relate with the world through a greater vision. And it is this greater vision that Prabhupada says here, how the Lord has created the material energy to provide a temporary name and form for the conditioned living beings, so that they can express themselves, so that they can, as my one friend, he remember who he really is, because it is there at that point where a lot of juice, a lot of fascination or excitement is generated when we can see who Krishna is, and also what Krishna does. So in these prayers then, these ladies are relishing the ultimate reality of Krishna and their own good fortune for having Krishna spending time with them for such a long time, having had the opportunity to see Krishna for such a long time. And then in the next chapter we will see how Krishna enters into his own city, and again the Bhagavatam will highlight for us the experience of those devotees as they receive Krishna in. So, all very fascinating, how the Bhagavatam is ultimately a book about rasa, a book about spiritual experience. And the more we absorb ourselves within the Bhagavatam, the more our consciousness will be lifted up, the more we'll become broad-minded, and the more we will avoid the unnecessary troubles that come from having a small-minded approach to life. Because it is in this small-minded approach to life that we ultimately become stupid. Become small-minded means you become stupid, means you cannot see the consequences really of what you're doing. You cannot see the bigger picture. And if you make your decisions in such a small-minded state, then there can really no auspiciousness can enter into our life. But the Bhagavatam broadens our consciousness up, makes our consciousness bigger, more expansive. And then from that perspective, when we make the decisions according to which we live our life, then the results will ultimately also be much more glorious. Okay, any questions or any comments or reflections, anything that has been said today? Yes.
Maybe for instance, so how to understand what's Krishna's plan?
Yeah. Well, the thing we have to understand one thing, that we will not understand Krishna's plan fully. At any moment, we very rarely we will have a full idea of what Krishna wants. But Krishna's plan, we generally understand it, and one would say, in particular things. There are certain things, like in your own life, many things that are uncertain. Many things that are uncertain, we don't know. We don't know what exactly to do, where exactly to go. But there are many things that are also very certain, isn't it? One could say there are these pillars of certainty, certain things that you are very clear about. For example, 16 rounds. I mean, it's like very clear and certain that this is part of my life. And this is here to stay. Our absorption in scripture, then our particular services. Some people like yourself, very lucky, have a very clear idea of where your service lies, and the service will stay with you until the end, isn't it? Like until one day you will be out there on the street with a cane and whatever, but you'll still be there, whacking those books out. It's quite clear. So we see that there are certain things in life that are clear. Spiritual master also sometimes, he gives us certain instructions that are very clear. So there is, in one sense, we can see, I've seen it oftentimes, that we can become a little confused at a certain point. What exactly does Krishna want from me? Because we are looking at that area where we're not sure. But at the same time, we should always keep also in mind, what are those things that are sure? And always hold on to these things, because the certainties are more important than the uncertainties. And by holding on to those things that we are sure about, then steadily Krishna's plan is revealed. So when it comes to particular decisions or specific things that we are not sure of, then we have to ultimately pray, because we have to understand that Krishna has to reveal it to us. You see, Krishna's plan in the previous chapter, Bhishmadev says that, what is that verse? He says, when they were there on the battlefield, at the end, when they were lying there on the battlefield, and Bhishmadev says that, he says, no one knows the plan of the Lord. He says, philosophers and great geniuses, they've tried to figure it out for thousands of years, but they don't understand. You cannot come to a conclusion, because Krishna's plan, ultimately, he has to reveal it to us, because his intelligence is much broader than our own. Here he says, Nayasya karichit rajan puman vedha vidichitam yad vijigyasaya yukta muyanti kavayopihi. He says, O king, no one can know the plan of the Lord. Even though great philosophers inquire exhaustively, they are bewildered. So we see that the devotee then is always placed in a little bit of a vulnerable position. Because the devotee, his certainty does not lie in his own intelligence. Ultimately our certainty, and this is a very important point, the ultimate certainty that we have in spiritual life is not that we exactly know what Krishna wants from us, but we do know one thing, that whatever Krishna wants is good. And that if we have more faith, as Prabhupada said, our faith is in the good will of Krishna. to see that Krishna he must have a plan, and his plan is good. And to always, again and again, try to stay sensitive and open towards that, and be careful that we will ultimately be able to positively respond to whatever Krishna wants from us. And really, at least you can see from Prabhupada's perspective, Prabhupada would oftentimes say that by the proper execution of our spiritual duties, of our sadhana, by staying in good consciousness, as we call it, by really making that effort, then we stay always open to Krishna revealing his plan towards us. But also another thing that we have to understand, another difficulty with understanding Krishna's plan is that Krishna's plan, Krishna does not shy away from giving challenges to his devotees. This has to be also understood. We see that in the lives of even great devotees, that challenges are there, obstacles are there. So we have to understand this is part of Krishna's plan. So we see also that that's why to be really able fully to appreciate Krishna's plan and to go with it, we have to be broad-minded. We have to be able to see the bigger picture. Otherwise we will shy away from what Krishna wants from us. It will be too difficult. The heart will close up and we will resist it, and then again we become influenced by the material energy. But we see then, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, for example, he says, what does he say? He says that the difficulties I experience in devotional service is the greatest ecstasy. So at a certain point, the devotees, they relish the obstacles that Krishna places on their path, because these obstacles ultimately serve to increase our determination, serve to increase our appreciation for what Krishna wants. But we see that this is all dependent on spiritual strength. So this is then the answer. On the one hand, we always stay sensitive to what Krishna's desire is, and we see that a large part of it comes from chanting attentively and deeply absorbing ourselves in scripture, and then also in always taking guidance from the Vaishnavas, the devotees, to always gain guidance from senior devotees that we trust. And on the other hand, to understand that to just know Krishna's plan is only one thing, but to able to properly go with it, to surrender with it, that is something else. And from there we have to make our plan how we will become spiritually strong, to make sure that we stay spiritually enlivened and enthusiastic. Otherwise we will not be able to always go with what Krishna wants from us. So we have to make a plan. This is then a plan that we have to make. How we will stay spiritually strong, how we will stay spiritually inspired, how we will ultimately make sure that we stay in a positive state of mind. And this means taking into account a lot of things, making sure that we stay happy even on the human platform, making sure we give attention to everything that needs attention in our life. Even sometimes something as basically as getting enough sleep, or making sure that we stay healthy, maybe if we have to do some exercise. All these things, it all adds up, to make sure that we can stay strong and happy in spiritual life. Because the one thing with Krishna's desire is that it is very strong. Krishna is gentle and is kind, but his desire is also unlimited. Krishna's desire is unlimited. And we see that these greatly advanced devotees who really have really surrendered to Krishna's desire intensely, you can see that their life is also quite intense. They really, it's explained how you see that when when Vamanadev kicked a hole in the covering of the universe, and then the Ganga was coming down, spiritual water coming down, and the demigods carried it, but then they asked, but if this water hits the earth will be completely ruined. The earth will be knocked out of its orbit, there will be a big crisis. What will I do? Then Lord Shiva said, I will take it upon my head. I will take it upon my head. And the Ganga, he took it on his head, and then from there it went onto the planet. So he took that force. So that's what we see, that spiritual energy of Krishna's desire is also, it's quite strong, So you have to have some strength to be able to absorb that. And that we also have to make a plan. That's why Prabhupada said, what does he say? Health, sadhana and service. That these three things, all three of them are required. To make sure that we stay just happy as human beings, have some strength. Then to make sure that we have our sadhana which is our personal connection with Krishna, and then to take a look at our service. What is it that Krishna wants me to do within this world? Because it is there that we will face challenges, and it is there that we will sometimes not be sure exactly what Krishna wants. But if we stand on, if these other two legs are strong, if our health is good, meaning if we take care of ourselves as human beings, and if we take care of our good sadhana, then this other idea of our service, it is there that we can then have some strength to properly execute what Krishna wants from us. And if we neglect any of these three things, then we will become weak. And then when we become weak, we become vulnerable to the influence of the material energy, who will then overcome us. So that's one answer. But if you ask this question to different people, you will always get, people have different answers to give. So that's one thing that I can offer you at least. Okay. Anything else?
So, is there a way how to understand whatever, like because our mind is very tricky, and we can tell you that, okay, this is good, how to be sensitive to these things, how to really distinguish between your mind and your Krishna mind.
Yeah, that is the trick. Well, we have Krishna's will comes to us in a few different ways. The first is the scripture, which is an important part, as we see here, Shastra Krit, that Krishna gives scripture to guide the living beings, but it is our responsibility to regularly be absorbed in the scripture. That's on us. The more we regularly absorb ourselves in scripture, from there we become much more open to hear Krishna's voice, because we make this effort to hear. But at the same time we see that we both read the Bible day and night, but you see black and I see white. That scripture also ultimately, we see that people can even also misuse scripture and misunderstand it and use it to justify material desires. So that also happens. So not just scripture is not just enough. We also have to be guided by personalities. So therefore the spiritual master is there as our, one would say, our ultimate authority. It is from him that we can always turn, because he is personally aware of what we are doing. To a certain, from him we can gain that clear direction. But the spiritual master is also not alone. The guru, there's also, we have to build up relationships with people that we trust. Not just one person, but a whole network. Like, for example, we see that there's this saying that it takes a village to raise a child. It's not just the parents. That if you go to the traditional system, that to discipline a child is very difficult. To make a child grow up takes a lot of energy, because he has to be trained the whole time. But how it used to work in the traditional system is everybody did it. It's not just you, it's not just the parents, but it's like the uncles, everybody. It's basically everybody is acting as the parent of the child, giving the child the guidance that it needs constantly. Not do this, don't do that, the whole time. Because it takes a lot of effort. So the same thing, the spiritual master is like our father. And the Vedas are like our mother. But it also takes a village to raise a child. That we have to also invest in spiritual relationships, a wide variety of spiritual relationships. Because it is in spiritual relationships that we can gain a lot of guidance and also objectivity. Because this is your problem that you were saying. How do I become objective? How do I know, is it my mind or is it not? So we have to open ourselves ultimately then to devotees. You see that just like Krishna, he explains that he reveals himself according to how we approach him. Isn't it? That's what he says in the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. He explains that everybody is following my path, but however you approach me, in this way I will reveal myself. The devotee is also similar. The devotee is similar. It is how you approach the devotees that the devotees will also reveal themselves. You see that sometimes people walk into the door, come into the temple, with a very challenging attitude. So they come not to hear, but to speak. They come to explain what the truth is. Explain what they have surmised to be the case. And then you sit with these people, and it's very interesting how they can come in and they can sit for an hour, 2 hours, if they catch a very merciful devotee who is too soft to walk away and who feels that he has to now listen to this person. I'm not one of them, so I generally don't get stuck in these conversations, but I've seen it. Then they catch a merciful devotee, and then the devotee sits there for an hour, hour and a half, listening to this person spew forth whatever he thinks is the truth. And then what is interesting is that the guy comes in, he does his whole thing, and he walks out. And he didn't at all get the benefit of the devotee's association. He was with him. He was with him right there for an hour. But he couldn't listen. Because he didn't approach the devotee in the right way. He approached him in the wrong way, and then you don't get the benefit. So similarly, we have to also learn a large source of strength in spiritual life is not just from the senior devotees. There's senior devotees like our spiritual master, and then also other senior devotees. And you have to cultivate a relationship with them if we want to actually get the benefit. Otherwise, we never open ourselves up to them. And also, we have to cultivate relationships with our friends in Krishna consciousness. But to also understand that a friendship in Krishna consciousness, you also have to, it's something that has to be practiced. Because we have to make a point to spiritualize our relationships even on a peer level. Otherwise we can always just stay normal friends. A lot of our time we're also just normal friends. We're joking around and doing this and doing that or whatever. But we also have to invest in making these relationships also spiritually deeper. To together, do something spiritual, and also to have the willingness to reveal our minds to the devotees, isn't it? Because in this way we actually gain access to what the devotees can offer us. So I have one friend that we have seen an interesting pattern, like in peer relationships you basically make turns to be the guru sometimes. Because he will come to me, I will go to him and I will say, I'm confused, I need your help, I need your advice. And then I will explain my situation to him, and then he will give me his advice. And then the next day he will come to me and he will say, I am confused, I need some of your advice. And in this way we're basically helping one another. So in our peer relationships we can gain a lot of help and strength, especially on a day-to-day basis, and specifically about particular things, specifically if we're feeling overwhelmed or uninspired. But we have to access it, you see? You have to make a point to really increase the depth of the relationship that you have with the devotees, to really be able to have them help you. Otherwise you can be like these people, who you're with the devotees but you're not really opening your heart to them. And then in that way you cannot really, you never really say what you're thinking, say what you're feeling. So obviously we don't do this with everyone. It's not that at the prasadam table you explain to everyone, your deepest intricate secrets and your doubts and your misgivings and the challenges that you're having. But it means that at a certain point with certain people we invest in opening and sharing what exactly it is that we are experiencing. Because otherwise the material energy's most powerful weapon, just like the Romans, is to divide and to conquer. Meaning that if we feel very separated, if we feel very isolated, if we feel that no one understands me, I'm completely alone, it is at that point that you have to know that you are in the grip of the material energy. Because it is this sense of isolation is the greatest source of de-inspiration, completely ruins our inspiration. But it is when we understand that no, that is not at all the case. There are devotees who are deeply concerned about me, devotees who are willing to help me, who are willing to help me in my service to Krishna, and then I have to reach out to these devotees. And I have to invest in deepening the relationships that I have with these devotees. It is there that a lot of spiritual strength can be found. And it is there that we can then become more resilient towards the onslaught of the material energy. Because we have seen that when we experience the obstacles that Maya puts on our path, much of it depends on the state of mind that we are in. If you're in a bad state of mind, something bad happens, it's very difficult. If you're in a good state of mind, something bad happens, then what can you do? Like the other day I went to the Bhakti Center Harinam, because the other day it was so wonderful. And then I thought I would go again, because it was so nice. So I went there, and then what happened is there were two guys with a guitar, and one guy with a drum who set up right next to the Harinam. And then they had some bad interaction, and then they were not willing to go, and they were making this very loud music while the Harinam was happening. And it was interesting to see because I came and I was sort of happy, so I didn't care. It was funny. It was, for me, it was funny. And sort of, oh, you just go along, interesting. But if you were in a bad state of mind, this is the kind of thing that just completely de-inspires you, isn't it? So that's how we see that the obstacles we face will always be there, but the way in which we experience it depends on the spiritual strength that we have built up within ourselves. And if the external energy is becoming too difficult to deal with, then we have to find a way to again inspire ourselves, to get into a better state of consciousness, gain spiritual strength, and then we can again go out and not be so much affected by the ups and downs that are there within the external world. Okay, it is 9:05, at least on my watch. My apologies for going over time. All glories to the Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Gaur Premanande Hari Bol.